So tell us a little bit about the history of wolves in Yellowstone and where things are now.
Well, that's a tough story. I'm very proud, as I said, Yellowstone's the world's first national park, 1872. But the mindset of people at the time was still all predators are bad. And the main predator in North America, Africa, it's different main predators, lions, leopards, cheetahs. But in North America, the main predator is wolf. We do have cougars, we do have bears, but wolves were everywhere, and they were really the big bad wolf is not an overstatement of how people viewed wolves when Yellowstone was made a park. So even though the idea was to set this land aside, all predators were considered bad and wolves were considered the worst. So they went on a predator killing campaign and all the wolves were killed off. The last wolf was killed. There is a number, 1926. Some people debate that, but wolves were killed from the entire Western United States by the 1930s. Most of the cougars were gone too. They tried to kill all the coyotes, but coyotes are wily, as you know from the Coyote and the Roadrunner program. They didn't get them all, but they got most of them. So Yellowstone was kind of a predator-free landscape for the first part of its history. And that's very important because everyone thinks, Yellowstone was established so early that it's a pristine park. And pristine means in its natural condition, untouched. And really, that's not true. The only thing that made it seem like it was pristine is it was never developed. There was no logging, ranching, farming, mining, shopping centers and plazas. And there's not many places in the United States like that. Maybe Alaska, but not the lower 48. So this idea that Yellowstone was a perfect representation of nature and wildness is not true. We altered it. And it really didn't, Yellowstone's as good as it's ever been right now because it took most of its history to fix what we did at the beginning.
Hmm.
And even though the bears weren't wiped out, their populations were reduced. And this had what we call ripple effects. Like throwing a rock into a pond, the ripples go out. Well, that's what happens when you take out the predators, wolves and cougars and bears. And it really changed Yellowstone. Even though on the surface, the scenery was great, below the surface, no, no. And so, I grew up thinking nature has value unto itself and all the parts need to be there. So that's why I really was happy to be hired to do the wolf introduction. And it took, a couple decades for them to really return to their original role. The cougars came back on their own. The bears were never eliminated. All of that affected the elk. There were too many elk in the park. People always think more is better. That's not always true, especially in nature. I'll use the word balance. Balance sometimes is misunderstood in nature because nature goes up and down and sideways and all over. But what I mean by balance in this case is there weren't enough predators and there were too many elk.
Hmm.
And too many elk meant they ate themselves out of house and home. And so it was not a natural system. And so now that the predators are back, the elk population did decline. Some of the plant communities are coming back. In this day and age, most of the environmental news that we hear is bad, with climate change and plastic in the oceans and, all these things. Yellowstone's actually might be as good as it's ever been. And a lot of that has to do with wolf recovery and other carnivore recovery. So it's a great story. And the hopeful part of it is nature can be restored. You just got to give it a chance.
Hmm. I guess during COVID, we saw some of that too. With everybody was stuck in their houses, and the wildlife came out.
It did. We
So
documented that in Yellowstone, actually.
were you able to see quite a bit of that when you were
Oh
there?
yeah. we had radio collars on wolves and elk and bison, and they started coming closer to the road, spending more time by the road, coming into developed areas. It was a strong effect, really. And it did, it happened like that.
Huh. That would have been quite the, that would have been a lot of fun to see that actually, because I know that in Colorado, some of the, I guess Rocky Mountain National Park, the elk were coming through, just in town and everything, and it was pretty interesting. So,